Adjutorium nostrum in nomine Domini. Okay, we left off with the encyclical Casti Connubii on Christian marriage by Pope Pius XI. When was it written?
1930.
1930. Between the two what?
World Wars.
Yes. So World War I was already brought a lot of damage and harm to the family, and the Pope is defending the marriage bond against the whole modern world, which is starting to attack the consecrated life and also the consecrated vows of marriage. Let's look at paragraph 47, page 14. Not all the sponsors of these new doctrines are carried to the extremes of unbridled lust. There are those who, striving as it were to ride a middle course, believe nevertheless that something should be conceded in our times as regards certain precepts of the divine and natural law. So bend the rules a little bit. But these likewise, more or less wittingly, are emissaries of the great enemy, who is ever seeking to sow cockle among the wheat. We therefore, whom the Father has appointed over his field, we, who are bound by our most holy office to take care lest the good seed be choked by the weeds, believe it fitting to apply to ourselves the most grave words of the Holy Ghost, with which the Apostle Paul exhorted his beloved Timothy. Be thou vigilant, fulfill thy ministry, preach the word, be instant in season and out of season, reprove, entreat, rebuke in all patience and doctrine. So that was St. Paul writing to his bishop, the bishop he consecrated, St. Timothy. So you see, St. Paul is telling him, preach the word, preach the faith. Be instant in season, out of season. Reprove, which means correct. Entreat, which means plead with, beg. Rebuke in all patience. And doctrine. Yeah, notice the emphasis always on doctrine. Always doctrine. The duty of bishops is to preach the faith, and the Pope, and priests. 48, Gavril.
And since in order that the deceits of the enemy may be avoided, it is necessary first of all that they be laid bare, since much is to be gained by denouncing these fallacies for the sake of the unwary, even though we prefer not to name these iniquities, as becometh saints. Yet for the welfare of souls we cannot remain altogether silent.
Do you have one?
I lost it. I don't know where it is.
Okay. So, again, notice here, this is all interesting. We can't stay silent. We have to expose the errors. And he's telling the bishops, expose the errors. Right? Don't hide them. Don't run from them. Don't bury them. Fake resistance, take notice. The new SSPX, take notice. No, they got to openly combat error and heresy. And the SSPX priests before 2012, they all blasted Vatican II in the new Mass very frequently in their sermons. Some even complained they went overboard and said it every Sunday. All right, maybe they went overboard. I maybe do that sometimes too, say it too often. But when you got a wolf who's still dragging souls to hell, it has to be named out, right? And this is what the popes are always saying. We should after this, I want to do the consecrated life on Holy Virginity after this, of Pius XII, to show how highly and beautiful is the consecrated life. Much higher than marriage. Marriage is high, but it's nothing compared to the consecrated life. But we should take a dive into the encyclical of Pope Pius, I think it's Pius VI, on to the bishops. It's a very short encyclical, but it's powerful. It's powerful. And he doesn't pull punches with the bishops. Paragraph 49, Andres.
To begin at the very source of these evils, their basic principle lies in this, that matrimony is repeatedly declared to be not instituted by the author of nature, nor raised by Christ the Lord to the dignity of a true sacrament, but invented by man.
So first big error, marriage doesn't come from God, it comes from
Man.
Go on.
Some confidently assert that they have found no evidence of the existence of matrimony in nature or in her laws, but regard it merely as the means of producing life and of gratifying in one way or another a vehement impulse. On the other hand, others recognize that certain beginnings, or as it were, seeds of true wedlock, are found in the nature of man, since, unless men were bound together by some form of permanent tie, the dignity of husband and wife, or the natural end of propagating and rearing the offspring, would not receive satisfactory provision. At the same time, they maintain that in all beyond this germinal idea of matrimony, through various concurrent causes, is invented solely by the mind of man, established solely by his will.
Yeah, so the Pope is saying this is a huge error. Man didn't institute marriage, God did. 50. Michael?
How grievously are these error, and how shamelessly they leave the ways of honesty is already evident from that we have set forth here regarding the origin of nature and nature of wedlock, its purposes and the good inherent in it. The evil of this teaching is plainly seen from the consequences which its advocates deduce from it, namely that the laws, institutions, and customs by which wedlock is governed, since they take their origin solely from the will of man, are subject entirely to him. Hence, can and must be founded, changed, and abrogated according to human caprice, and the shifting circumstances of human affairs. That the generative power, which is grounded in nature itself, is more sacred and has wider range than matrimony. Hence, it may be exercised both outside as well as within the confines of wedlock. And though the purpose of matrimony be set aside, as though to suggest that the license of a base fornicating woman should enjoy the same rights as the chaste motherhood of a lawful wedded wife.
Yeah, so this is very close to what Pope Francis promoted in his horrible heretical encyclical on marriage, which allows the divorced to remarry. And here it is. This is the error. That if God is no longer the author of marriage, but man is, well, then you have every excuse. You don't have to be faithful to marriage. And you can be a fornicator and jump like a rabbit from partner to partner. And that's what's happening today. Thanks to the scandalous silence of the bishops when they should have condemned divorce back in the 50s. And the horrible encyclical of Pope Francis promoting this promiscuity. It's very serious. And it erodes the sacredness of marriage and crumbles society. It just crumbles. When marriages are strong and faithful, society holds together like a compact body, like a vehicle where the wheels don't fall off and the nuts and bolts aren't loose. But if these things start falling off, everything starts collapsing, right? 51. Anthony, take it.
Armed with these principles, some men go so far as to concoct new species of unions, suited, as they say, to the present temper of men and the times, which various new forms of matrimony they presume to label temporary, experimental, and companionate. These offer all the indulgence of matrimony and its rights without, however, the indissoluble bond, and without offspring, unless later the parties alter their cohabitation into a matrimony into the full sense of the law.
So what's he saying here? Anyone?
You may have unions outside or separate from marriage with the same rights as marriage.
Yeah, and these libertines, these liberals, we would say, are saying, well, yeah, it's just experimental, it's temporary. and we just want to make sure we want to live together for the rest of our lives. So we'll live together. Maybe we'll test it out for 3 years, and if it doesn't work out, we'll move on. And this is the thinking today with a lot of people, modern man. And of course, it's fallen even more low. Now it's not just men and women, but even lower than that, as you all know. So, and notice, this all looks modern and up to date, but this is as old as the hills. There were heresies in the early church that were promoting this kind of thing. Anybody name one that St. Augustine was a member of?
Manichaeism.
Yeah, the Manichees. The Manichees taught there were two gods, right? The good God created invisible things, the invisible world, spiritual world, and the evil God created
the physical, material world.
Yes, so if material things are bad and the body is evil, then marriage is evil because it involves the body, doesn't it? So they would condemn marriage and say it's not a sin to fornicate. It's not a sin to misuse the body like that because the body is evil anyway, right? So all this talk is as old as the hills. It's basically any excuse to enjoy the privileges that belong to marriage without carrying the responsibility behind it towards the spouses and towards the children. 52.
Indeed, there are some who desire and insist that these practices be legitimatized by the law, or, at least, excused by their general acceptance among the people. They do not seem even to suspect that these proposals partake of nothing of the modern culture, in which they glory so much, but are simply hateful abominations, which beyond all question reduce our truly cultured nations to the barbarous standards of savage peoples.
Yes, so among the savages, among the barbarians and the Indians in the United States and Canada, what did the missionaries find? They found polygamy, and they just, like animals, they didn't stay faithful to marriage. Archbishop Lefebvre said in Africa, it took them a while to teach the men, you have to be faithful to one wife and not many. So we're back to that. But notice the interesting point he makes here at the very beginning. They desire that these practices be legitimatized by law, which means in his day, divorce was forbidden. By law, it was forbidden. You couldn't divorce. And that's a healthy law, obviously. But that's gone now, so we're back to barbarism. 53. Gavril.
And now, venerable brethren, we shall explain in detail the evils opposed to each of the benefits of matrimony. First consideration is due to the offspring, which many have the boldness to call the disagreeable burden of matrimony, and which they say is to be carefully avoided by married people, not through virtuous continence, which Christian law permits in matrimony when both parties consent, but by frustrating the marriage act.
Okay, so let's get rid of this burden of children in our marriage. And he's saying that one way that the church blesses is if a couple, let's say during Lent, they agree they will be chaste for a period of 2 or 3 days or a week or all of Lent, whatever, but they both have to agree as an act of adoration to God and prayer. They can do that, and that's pleasing to God. But if one partner does not agree, the other can't say, well, I'm going to do this anyway. They can't, because the other partner has the right to the marriage union upon request. That's part of the marriage debt. But he's saying it's much worse than this. This is not what they're pushing, is to frustrate the marriage act, which means block children, either artificially by artificial birth control or naturally by NFP, natural family planning, which is when the husband and wife unite deliberately, keeping track of the calendar, to unite only in time she is least likely to conceive a child. So it's not good, and some call it Catholic birth control, and many Catholics try to use it like this, and that offends God very much. To do that to stop or limit children is offensive to God. Read on.
Some justify this criminal abuse on the ground that they are wary of children and wish to gratify their desires without their consequent burden. Others say that they cannot, on the one hand, remain continent, nor on the other can they have children because of the difficulties, whether on the part of the mother or on the part of family circumstances.
So wow, the doctors really abuse this. I've heard so many cases where the doctors try to scare the mother after her first or second child. You can't have any more. You're gonna get sick. You're gonna die. Your uterus can't hold the pressure anymore. And God bless these good mothers who ignore these stupid doctors and take the children God sends. And they do fine. They do fine. I know one case of a mother had 12 or 13 children, 11 cesareans. 11 cesarean sections. They would have to cut the womb. And the doctors and nurses all ganged up, and you can't have any more, you got to stop this. But she kept having the children God sent, and God gave her strength. But now it's a real conspiracy of the doctors and nurses, and they can get nasty, downright nasty. That's why many good young couples now are choosing to have a, what do they call that? Midwife. But a midwife who's trained with nursing, who they know personally, who they can trust, and the midwife is there to come deliver the baby at the home. And she's just there basically in case anything goes seriously wrong. That's all. And she can deliver the baby. And I know numerous cases where whether they intended it or not, the baby was born at home, and the father was the only one around to receive the baby and deliver it. So that happens too, even with couples who plan to go to the hospital. So a lot of couples are having more babies at home, and the mothers that I have talked to who have done this, they just say it's so peaceful, and it's so normal, and it's so calm, it's happy, it's the way it's supposed to be. Like our grandparents, at least mine, and certainly our grandparents, all were born for centuries at home. For centuries and centuries. But now they really push the mothers. You can't have any more children. You have to have a hysterectomy, which is they just cut out everything on the mother that she can't have any more children. It's horrible. 54, Andres.
But no reason, however grave, may be put forward, by which anything intrinsically against nature may become conformable to nature and morally good. Since, therefore, the conjugal act is destined primarily by nature for the begetting of children, those who in exercising it deliberately frustrate its natural power and purpose, sin against nature, and commit a deed which is shameful and intrinsically vicious.
Yes, so God is offended by those who don't use these faculties of marriage for the purpose that he intended. That is, to be open to the children he sends. 55, Michael?
Small wonder, therefore, if Holy Writ bears witness...
Holy Writ. Holy Writ is another old English term for...
The Scriptures.
Yes, go on.
If Holy Writ bears witness to that the Divine Majesty regards with greatest detestation this horrible crime, and at times has punished it with death, as St. Augustine notes, intercourse, even with one's legitimate wife, is unlawful and wicked where the conception of the offspring is prevented. Onan, the son of Judah, did this, and the Lord killed him for it.
Yes, he was struck dead instantly. That's called the sin of onanism, which is withdrawing in order to prevent the natural conception of the child. So that's St. Augustine on marriage, book 2, number 12. That's Genesis 38. Genesis 38, verse 8, where Onan is struck dead by God for practicing birth control. Birth control. And just think how twisted and perverse we have become today that, I mean, you can't walk in a gas station aisle without having this stuff shoved in your face. And in many gas stations, you just want to use the bathroom and there's this corrupt stuff hanging on the wall. Or in the airports in London, in England, they have them all splattered in the bathroom. It's really sick. The promotion of this evil, which really offends God. And that means there are millions and millions of children who have been blocked, who should have been born. And even worse, killed because of the pill. The pill often causes abortion, which penitents have to be reminded of in the confessional. Because sometimes the priest has to ask, was there contraception used? Yes, on whose side? The woman's. In which case they have to be very cautioned. Do you realize that these pills can cause abortions? Oh, I didn't know that. Well, they have to be instructed because the pills do cause abortions most of the time. I'm not an expert on these pills and how they all work, but I understand at least for most of them, they just flush out the uterus. They flush out the newly conceived baby deliberately, which is abortion. It's murder if it has that intention, right? And this is how corrupt our modern society is. It's really corrupt. That the sin of fornication has just become normal. It's promoted in the rock music, it's promoted in the fashions, it's promoted in the movies. And sometimes kids grow up today and think, oh, I didn't even know it was sinful. I didn't even know it was wrong. That's how far gone we have become. It's really bad. It's really sad. It's really destructive. And that's why the poor girls, I've heard of Catholic mothers, Navasordo, of course, giving birth control to their 15-year-old daughter, 14-year-old daughter. Well, she's old enough now. Here, just be home after midnight. And these are the modern homes. And Navasordo homes. And then even worse, Catholic bishops who will probably burn in hell forever for this, giving birth control to the children in schools, in the Catholic schools. In St. Louis, they were doing that when I was there. Horrible crime, and the bishops and priests are responsible for this. So you wonder why I get on the bishops. I mean, I'm nothing compared to what the popes were on their lieutenants. I mean, just think, one bishop permitting the evil of this, and he's not even preaching, he just permits it. And he might even say, well, they're kids and we have to understand our culture. We can't scare them away with all these hard rules, right? That's what they say. And Vatican II promotes that. And they end up sending many children to hell, wrecking these kids, wrecking up these girls and boys who are ruined mentally ruined because of this stuff. Suicides are a result of these sins. One of the daughters of lust is despair. So it's really criminal when you see how many souls are probably in hell because of these spineless bishops who won't even correct something so obviously evil. 56. Who's up? Anthony, go ahead.
Since, therefore, openly departing from the uninterrupted Christian tradition, some recently have judged it possible solemnly to declare another doctrine regarding this question, the Catholic Church, to whom God has entrusted the defense of the integrity and purity of morals, standing erect in the midst of the moral ruin which surrounds her, in order that she may preserve the chastity of the nuptial union from being defiled by this foul stain, raises her voice in token of her divine ambassadorship, and through our mouth proclaims anew any use whatsoever of matrimony exercised in such a way that the act is deliberately frustrated in its natural power to generate life is an offense against the law of God and of nature, and those who indulge in such are branded with the guilt of a grave sin.
Yeah, so it's a mortal sin to use the marriage pleasures outside of the way God intended. So the golden rule is all acts previous to the union must finish in the union that God intended. That's the way it is. I can't change that. No pope or bishop can change that, or pope, or any nun or layman. God has established that, and it's part of nature. And so the pope himself is saying this is a mortal sin. So to use the generative faculties outside of the way God intended is a mortal sin. So that's in marriage, let alone outside of marriage. If we're not even married, it's a mortal sin all the time to use these pleasures at all, because we don't have the right to indulge in them. That's why those who are not married must be pray for purity, pray for chastity, pray for strength. And it's a constant fight and battle. 57.
We admonish, therefore, priests who hear confessions and others who have the care of souls, in virtue of our supreme authority and in our solicitude for the salvation of souls, not to allow the faithful entrusted to them to err regarding this most grave law of God. Much more, that they keep themselves immune from such false opinions, in no way conniving in them. If any confessor or pastor of souls, which may God forbid, lead the faithful entrusted to him into these errors, or should at least confirm them by approval or by guilty silence, let him be mindful of the fact that he must render a strict account to God, the supreme judge, for the betrayal of his sacred trust, and let him take to himself the words of Christ. They are blind and leaders of the blind, and if the blind lead the blind, both fall into the pit.
Wow, this is very good. This is heavy hitting, but it needs to be said. And silence is always golden, right?
No.
Isn't it always golden?
No.
When is it not?
In the face of wrong?
Well, give the example he's giving. When is silence not golden? When the priest is silent in the confessional and doesn't correct the penitent. Me and my husband are using birth control. All right, for your penance, say 3 Hail Marys. And the priest doesn't correct that. He's guilty before God. He'll answer it before God. That's what the Pope is saying. So silence is not only not golden, it's murderous. In this case, it's murdering and blocking children that are supposed to be. And when bishops are silent, obviously, on doctrine and the faith, that's even worse, because that's contraception and birth control, killing the souls. So you see how serious business is the battle of the church. It's a serious battle. So there was an old priest that gave our diaconate retreat. It was Father Horvath. He was an old priest who said the Latin Mass, and a good old priest. And he said that in the 1940s, he gave a sermon condemning birth control, which is the teaching of the church. The pastor the next Sunday came to his Mass, and when he was about to preach his sermon, the pastor said, "I'll take this sermon." And the priest sat down, and the pastor got up and said, "This priest will never preach from this pulpit again." Because during the week, he got a bunch of phone calls That priest condemned birth control. This priest he's too strict. This is too restricting. This is destroying our family. This is causing friction between my husband and wife. So he got all these calls and uproars from these liberal faithful of the 40s. And I can bet these were the girls that were wearing the new fashions, the pencil skirts, the new skirts that were just at the knee. This is 1940s. You can bet they were right on the edge of liberal fashions. And the V-neck going lower and all that. So the pastor, he's probably in hell right now. He's probably in hell unless he repented. And then maybe a good priest might have reported him to the bishop when he heard about this. And what does the bishop do? Oh, well, Bob, just take it easy. You know, maybe you should say something about marriage. And then up the chain. So, and now you got Pope Francis promoting the most evil divorce and remarriage. That's the fruit of the new church. And sodomy. I mean, this is so horrible that men with cassocks promoting sodomy. It's just frightful. And the punishment for it is severe. It is fire and brimstone on earth and in the next life. So that's the new conciliar church. That's what it leads to. It leads to this foul decadence. 58.
As regards the evil use of matrimony to pass over the arguments, which are shameful, not infrequently others that are false and exaggerated are put forward. Holy Mother Church very well understands clearly appreciates all that is said regarding the health of the mother and the danger of her life, and who would not grieve to think of these things, who is not filled with the greatest admiration when he sees a mother risking her life with heroic fortitude, that she may preserve the life of the offspring which she has conceived. God alone, all bountiful and all merciful as he is, can reward her for the fulfillment of the office allotted to her by nature, and will assuredly repay her in a measure full to overflowing.
Yes, so mothers who have been warned by the doctor, if you have another baby, this could be harmful to your life, and let alone your health. And so, and he's praising, God bless those mothers who are open to the children God sends, and they have another baby, and maybe she has to, I've heard of pregnancies where they had to lay down almost the whole pregnancy. So these mothers are heroic, and God will reward them abundantly for the sacrifice they make to receive another baby. And in some cases, rare, but in some cases the mother does die. My own brother, James, his wife bled out at childbirth, and the baby lived, little Abraham. Now he's a big, huge 6'4" kid, but she died. It was a hemorrhage, and they couldn't stop it. So, in which case, St. Paul says the mother will be saved through childbearing. But notice the Pope is saying at the beginning of paragraph 58, Pius XI, all these exaggerations, all these attacks from the liberals. You can bet they were loaded with letters and messages sent to Rome. How can you be so cruel? How can you be so heartless? These mothers risking their lives, and you won't allow birth control, right? And how extreme and how strict, and I'm leaving the Catholic Church. I just can't handle this. A lot of people left the church over this question, and still do. Believe me, that's the one thing they hate about the Catholic Church is the condemnation of birth control. That is one of the things, probably the biggest reason why people leave the Catholic Church, especially teenagers when they want to live promiscuous, and the church teaches you can't do that. Oh, religion was shoved down my throat. I'm out of here. And they go off and trot away to live like pigs. But all the excuses. And in the 1800s, early 1900s, the Freemasons were putting cartoons in the newspapers of the Catholic men keep their wives barefoot and pregnant. Barefoot and pregnant, mocking the large Catholic families. And that was a big thing with Mexico, the image of the mother with poor children and having another baby, mocking the large Catholic families. Just so satanic. And Pope Francis, to his eternal shame, in 2015 or 16, I was actually in the Philippines with Father Pfeiffer at the time, and doing mass circuits out there. And Pope Francis he was coming the next day. We were flying out of the Philippines, and he was coming in the next day. And the message he gave to the Filipino, what impressed me about the Philippines was it was just beautiful. There's children all over the place. There's children everywhere. Everywhere. Out in the country, you drive and there's children playing on the side of the streets, in their houses and on their bikes. You go to the big cities, there's children everywhere, running around and there's some of them are poor, really poor, with a rooster in their hand. And the shopping malls there are like 4 stories high and super packed and fancy and, way more technological fancy than anything in the United States. Our malls are like backward buggies compared to theirs. But tons of children. And what does Pope Francis say to the Filipinos? You don't need to multiply like rabbits. That's from the mouth of the Vicar of Christ. What a pity. What a shame. He might be burning in hell just for those words. Because you know how many took those words to heart and started using birth control after that? Started using NFP after that? All over the world? These are very serious crimes. And this is the church's teaching. You're hearing it right out of the mouth of a Catholic Pope, Pius XI. And today, if he started teaching this from Rome, if the Pope tomorrow, Leo XIV, started condemning and quoting this, he would have huge protests lining the streets in front of the Vatican. And then that used to happen, Name one of he's canonized by Pope John Paul II, but he certainly is a saint, who as a young man in 1917, in fact, saw the communist parades in front of the Vatican and carrying banners showing Lucifer crushing the head of St. Michael.
St. Maximilian Kolbe.
Yes. He saw that and said, we need an army. They got an army for Satan. We need an army for the Virgin Mary. And that's where he started the Knights of the Immaculata and the Franciscans and so forth. So, 59, who's next?
Holy Church knows well that not infrequently one of the parties is sinned against rather than sinning, when for a grave cause he or she reluctantly allows the perversion of the right order. In such a case there is no sin, provided that, mindful of the law of charity, he or she does not neglect to seek to dissuade and to deter the partner from sin. Nor are those considered as acting against nature who in the married state use their right in the proper manner, although on account of natural reasons, either of time or of certain defects, new life cannot be brought forth. For in matrimony, as well as in the use of the matrimonial rites, there are also secondary ends, such as mutual aid, the cultivating of mutual love, and the quieting of concupiscence, which husband and wife are not forbidden to consider, so long as they are subordinated to the primary end, and so long as the intrinsic nature of the act is preserved.
Yeah, so in the case of when a couple is beyond the childbearing years and they're older, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and she can't have any more children, the Pope is just saying they can still unite physically to fulfill the second end of marriage, which is the love and support of the spouses. Adjutorium nostrum in nomine Domini.